Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Opinion, the talk show where your opinions matter. I am Mirna Santiago, and joining me for our discussion today is my co-host, Adeline Ortiz, and our guest, attorney Marco Caviglia. Welcome, Marco.
Welcome.
Glad to be back.
Yeah. Well, today we're discussing an interesting topic, and that is whether or not deadbeat dads should be ordered to pay child support. Currently, there are 3 courts in Ohio and Wisconsin where the judges have actually ordered the fathers who owe large amounts in child support not to have any more children. So we're going to determine whether or not this is overreaching by the courts or just about time. And before we do that, though, I just want to mention a couple of comments that we've gotten on our prior episodes. One was from Linda in Putnam, and she is commenting on our lookism episode where we discussed whether or not companies should be able to take looks into consideration in hiring determinations. And Linda says, lookism is in every industry, not just in the airline industry, and I'm sorry, not just in the fashion industry, and just look at the airline industry where they are actually allowed to charge you for 2 seats or double fare when you're taking up 2 seats or spilling over into a second seat.
Sure.
Yeah. There's also Gary from Westchester who says that people will continue to have preferences, and that we should also just look at Chris Christie and the comments that he's been receiving about the fact that he'll never be able to stand 4 years as president because of his weight. So, yeah, I guess they're right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's everywhere.
What do you guys think about deadbeat dads and not having any more children?
Well, for me, I looked at the 3 decisions, right? One was from Ohio and the other 2 were from Wisconsin. And these judges were really adamant that these people should not have any more kids. And I understand that it's because they owe almost $100,000 in child support. But I was sort of scratching my head as to how can the court even sit there on the bench and order someone not to procreate? To me, it's the definition of overreaching. I understand that the court has the right to tell them you have to pay your child support, or to hold them in contempt for not paying the child support, or to bring them back to court, or whatever it is that they're going to do. But to tell them you cannot have any more children, no, that's overreaching in the worst way.
I don't know, but of course I think that the court has the power basically to do whatever it wants. I mean, in most cases they can say whatever they want. Whether or not they can actually enforce it is a different story, but I don't disagree with those decisions. What do you think, Marco?
Well, first of all, in those cases you have to remember that there was a criminal conviction involved, and these guys were on probation. And when you're on probation, you're not in the same status as a regular person. They can tell you to stand on your head, and that's a condition of probation. And if you don't do it, you go to jail. So that's apparently withstood appellate review in those states. I don't know if it would if it went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. On the other hand, you do have to take into consideration that the more we demand of society to take care of children, other people's children, and others in society, then there should be a corresponding requirement that society be allowed to infringe on your personal choices and so forth, at least as far as they affect other people and the taxpayer. So I think there's 2 sides to the story.
I think, though, if now you're saying that society has a right to tell you when to have children or not to have children, then we might as well be living in communist China, where they tell you can only have 1 child or 2 children, depending on which government you have in office. That's the reason why we live in the United States, and that's why I believe it's overreaching by the court to say you cannot have any more children. It is all well and fine that these people are, they have a criminal conviction and they're on probation. And I know that when you do have a criminal conviction, the court can tell you not to hang out with known felons. They can tell you not to drink or not to take drugs. But now you're going into personal freedoms. And I've read many Supreme Court cases, U.S. Supreme Court cases, where the Supreme Court has said there is no court, no legislature, no body of law, basically, that can tell people not to have any more children, what to do with your own body. It's under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. It's under the privacy rights. The courts cannot do this. It's overreaching.
They can do it. Again, enforcing the decision will be a whole different story. But, again, we infringe on all of those rights. Once someone, as Marco highlighted, is convicted, the ball game sort of changes. Of course, we are all entitled to our freedoms and our rights and so on and so forth. But when you are convicted or when you're charged, when you come into the justice system in this way, you're already making the decision for yourself that you're giving up certain rights. And I think that we sort of touched on this when a few episodes ago when we discussed whether or not inmates should have conjugal visits, right? And our panelists at the time sort of argued that this would be a great way to perpetuate family values and so on. Well, the same is true. It's like essentially you've come into the justice system for a reason. Owing $100,000 in child support is absolutely outrageous. And no, you shouldn't be allowed to continue to make babies if you can't afford to pay for them.
But how are they going to make them stop? And what, and what if this person has religious beliefs that prohibits them from contraception? Or, a lot of Catholics the Catholic Church, the doctrine in the Catholic Church is that you cannot use contraception. You're not supposed to use birth control. Definitely no abortion. So what if this person is a Catholic, or what if they have some other religious belief? Now you have the court infringing upon their right of religion as well. Again, it's overreaching. I can't see how you reach another decision than, another conclusion than that this is something that goes beyond what the court is designed to do. And let me also add, because I see you getting ready to jump in there, but let me also add that the court can only interpret law. And there is no law at all on any book, in any place, in any of the states in the United States that says the court has the right to do this. So the legislature hasn't passed any laws allowing them to do this.
Well, a few points. First of all, because there's no laws on the books now, doesn't mean you can't have them tomorrow. If you look at the jurisprudence throughout the United States history, laws change all the time, sometimes, usually in conjunction with changing mores of society. But the point you raised about how do you enforce this is an interesting one. I mean, the United States Supreme Court has ruled that you can't sterilize people. We used to sterilize people in the United States regularly up through the 1960s, including in prisons. But there was a Virginia court that tried to tell a welfare mom that you can't have any more kids, or we're going to cut them off unless you cut them off from additional aid, unless you get sterilized. And that was rejected by U.S. Supreme Court. So if you can't do sterilization and you're going to impose a law, maybe you should make women co-conspirators in the crime. I mean, after all, you're blaming the men about procreating. What about the women? I mean, they're the gatekeepers, aren't they? And besides that, they have more control. I mean, unless they're rape victims, I mean, they really have a choice as much as men. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like a male chauvinist, but, you can't really foist this on the male gender. But I think most importantly, society has lost its main enforcement tool, which is mores and social norms. When, during the post-Murphy Brown era of 30 years or whatever we've been now, when we decided that it's okay to just have babies. It doesn't matter if you're married, it doesn't matter what your financial situation, it's just your right, and many people are just having babies just for the sake of having babies or not thinking about it. The societal reaction has been, okay, that's okay. In fact, they even get a lot of sympathy. And when you lose that main control in society, it's not the laws that are going to put the values back, it's people perpetuating or allowing values to dissipate.
Sure.
I kind of take offense at that, Marco, and I'll tell you why. I think there was a presidential, either it was a sitting president or, and I'm having, a brain burp here, so I can't, I can't remember who it was, but I do remember that someone blamed Murphy Brown and the fact that Murphy Brown was this show, and she was a professional woman, and she had a kid, and this person came out on the news and basically said, well, now we're going to have a whole bunch of these single moms because Murphy Brown has had a kid on television. And in Murphy Brown's case, who was a professional woman and who can take care of her child, why not? Why can't you have a child on your own? There's nothing that says you have to have a husband. There's nothing that says that you have to have child support from a man to take care of your own child. So the Murphy Brown thing and societal norms, we're changing, but I think we're also evolving. What we're talking about are these women who apparently are going to court because they cannot take care of their kids, and now they're trying to force these men to pay for child support. So the fact that women, if you're a professional woman, if you have your own job, you have your own home, you have, why can't you have a child? I don't think it's society's place to tell us you can or cannot have it.
That's a separate issue. I think that's, I mean, we're not saying, you can't have a child. You just can't have a child that you can't afford to pay for.
Exactly.
Okay? And when you say that there's nothing that says that, you need child support from the dad, no, there are plenty of laws that say that you need child support from the other half.
You don't need it.
You may not need it.
I
you
know.
may not need it, okay, but you are entitled to it. It's a
You're
right.
entitled to it,
okay,
yeah.
but again, when we're discussing sort of rights, of course, the Supreme Court has held over and over the right to procreate and so on.
Yeah.
So yes, so we have a right, great. All right, but we also have a right to drink. We also have a right to smoke, and we have to use our discretion as to how much of that we're going to engage in, or whether or not we're going to engage in it at all, because we have a right to do it. It's the same thing when it comes to children. Women, if you cannot afford to support this child by yourself, I mean, go into this decision to have this child being fully prepared to take care of that child by yourself, don't have it, because you're right, there is no guarantee that father is going to be there to help you raise it, to help you support it. And certainly, if you're having baby 6 with this, this mass procreator, there's a good chance that he's not going to help you. So, of course,
I want to ask Marco about that, because I know you do some family law as well. Now, can the court go after these fathers even if the women are not putting in child support orders or putting in a request for child support?
Yes, if the county, wherever the woman and the child reside, finds itself having to give financial support, form of welfare, food stamps, or anything like that, they will immediately file suit against the father.
Yes.
And enforce the child support guidelines, which range from 17% for one child to about 38-39% for several children. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, a lot of the men, it's proportional to their income. But I'd like to go back to one point you had raised, just as sort of a rebuttal. You have to consider the fact that there's a number of factors that affect. You're saying that if it's economically feasible for me to have 12 children, I can have 12 children as a single mom. But if I'm poor, I can't have any children if we're out of wedlock. So, I mean, that's sort of a real capitalistic sort of argument. But I do want to say that the other point you raised about religion is very valid, and there's probably nothing we can do. I mean, as long as society entertains personal preferences in the form of religion or otherwise. I mean, the Old Testament says, "Go forth and multiply," and that's what we're doing.
Exactly, yeah.
And like you said, the Catholic Church doesn't condone contraception. So where does that leave you? So I don't think that that's going to change at least in our lifetime.
We're crossing a lot of different lines there when you talk about what religion says, what the Bible says. I mean, it's hundreds of years old, different times, different values. I mean, you have to use some degree of common sense in today's day.
The court has to take that into consideration. I think that's really what we're getting at, is that the court does have to consider personal freedoms, privacy, the right to religion, and that sort of thing, and these courts are not.
You have your right to religion, but if you cannot afford to raise that child, okay, and it's very expensive to raise a child, don't have it. Yeah. Don't have it. Don't make it. Don't engage in it. Okay, you just don't do it, because I come from a family. I have aunts and uncles who've been on the welfare system their entire lives. Why? Okay, they have these children. They can't work. They have no skills. They dropped out of high school. They didn't get an education, and so on. And so what? They continue to drain the system. Well, I take offense to that, because I have been working since I'm a teenager. Okay, this is a system that I'm paying into that's being drained by people like this, who basically sit home and have babies and, you know, take drugs or use alcohol, and this becomes, you know, their basis for continuing to stay on the welfare system, because now they're disabled, but they don't get help, and they don't go out, they don't get employable skills, they don't get an education, they don't look for ways out of this, and yet the opportunity is there, and they continue to drain from a system that I'm paying into.
But that's different, and we may need to have you back for that discussion about about the welfare system and whether they should cut off women after, you know, if you have 5 children and then you're having a 6th and you're still in the welfare system, you know, can they cut that person off? Because now you are draining the system. My offense to Marco's previous comment was about the women who can afford to, you know, professional women who can afford to take care of their own children, and yet now it's sort of like it's looked down upon if you have a child by yourself. A lot of women, you know, I mean, that's another discussion that we didn't, you know, it obviously doesn't go with this discussion, but we can have that as well about why is it that women are not getting married in the rate as they used to, and why we're having these, well, not me, but why women are having these kids out of wedlock. But going back to your argument about the deadbeat dads, well, I think we need to get to a point in society, and I mentioned this when we had our DWI discussion, that we need to make sure that our legislators and that our courts are not passing laws, are not creating laws, because the court in this case I felt created law, and that they're not making these laws draconian, that we're not making these laws extreme. And believe me, I don't think that, you know, deadbeat dads should just get away with being deadbeat dads. These guys, if you look at the cases, there was one guy who had 9 children with 6 different women.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, that's the height of irresponsibility, obviously. And the court obviously hated him to the point that I think the court said on the record, the court actually said on the record, I wish I had, you know, the right to have you forcibly castrated, sterilized. The court said that on the record. So, and I understand that. I understand that that's the height of irresponsibility. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the courts are not stepping on the toes of other rights, that privacy right, that right to religion. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's what happens when the laws become draconian.
And you know, Marco, you said earlier, well, you know, why not have the women share in this crime,
Yes,
you know, as the
I agree with
co-conspirators? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason why is because look at this guy, 9 children with 6 different women.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the opportunity and the ability to spread your seed far and wide, okay? And to procreate everywhere and anytime you really want
How
to.
about a woman with 4 children by 4 different fathers? How's that?
Yeah, that is true.
No
I mean, if you
different.
hang around family court long enough, you'll see every
Yeah.
permutation possible. I guarantee
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I gotta
Well,
tell you, I think
there-
if you do have someone, if you have a woman with, you know, 4 kids from 4 different fathers and she's on welfare, then she should be dragged into court too. Now that I would agree.
I'd love to know how she has
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
I'd love to know how she has. I'm a single mom with 2 kids, and I don't have a minute outside of these children. Never mind running around to, you know, to have more with different men. It's just, you know, I can't even imagine that. Okay, but I think that even just going outside of that sort of financial responsibility. I mean, again, when you talk about women sharing in this responsibility, yeah, it's important that they recognize that when they make that choice to have unprotected sex or to go ahead and have a baby, that they need to understand that there's a big possibility that they're going to be raising that child by themselves, whether or not they're even in a solid relationship or even married. I mean, look at the divorce rates today. More and more women are already raising their children by themselves and have to do that independently with no financial support from the father. So you know, it's a big decision that women do have to consider.
There was one study that found that of 3 factors that guarantee you to a lifetime of poverty, one of them is having a child out of wedlock.
Yes,
So
yeah, I did see
it is a big social problem that affects taxpayers in the United States. So, but then again, trying to say that we should prohibit men or women from procreating, like you said, there's a choice there, and we want to remove the choice by a law from the particular actor, and I don't think that's going to fly. Ever.
No, we should have the right to remove that choice by law when you're going on your 6th child that you can't support.
So you're in favor of sterilization?
Yeah, that's the only
I think if you're
option.
going on your 6th child with no financial support and you have no way to pay for that child and you don't have a father who's helping, you know what? Yeah, at a certain
So
point,
maybe
I
China's
don't
right.
think that. Don't they have like the most children of anybody in the world, though? I mean, isn't
the
this like
China
hypocrisy?
has that 2-child rule.
We'll get
because
there.
they're giving
We'll
away
get
their
there.
little
You
their
think we'll
female
eventually get
children.
there?
They're
Sure,
giving
why
away
not?
their females to the United States for
yeah,
adoption.
there
That's
are a
why.
lot of
Okay.
adoptions going on from China, and I don't know. I don't think that's the way to go. I really I don't know why you guys aren't concerned that this court, this is a judge who is supposed to be impartial, and to have some of the language that's in this decision, from the I would force you to be sterilized. I'd be scared to see where the courts are going with this. It frightens me.
Well, that's an inappropriate judicial remark from the bench, probably, but it probably gets some votes, which is unfortunately
Sure.
the way judges, at least in New York State, are elected by saying the right things in public. So.
And at the same time, yeah. Well, we're going to move on to our lightning round, and I'm going to give you some context for the lightning round. So if you read, you guys out there read the opening credits to the show, you probably know that our lightning round topic is, are we becoming a nation of overly politically correct whiners? Okay. There was a news story recently out of California. There was this woman, and she was at a tech convention. And even now, there are not a lot of women in the tech field. And this woman was on a line. She was waiting to get into some exhibit at this tech convention. And there were two young guys, and they were talking behind her. And they were having this conversation and kind of joking amongst themselves, not to her, but they were talking about, one guy was joking with the other guy about how big his dongle was, right? And I had to look it up because when I read the article, I was like, what in the world is a dongle? But the dongle is basically a software. It's a hardware that allows you to read secured software. So it was a tech term. Okay. But they're kind of joking back and forth about this guy creating this dongle and how big the dongle was and what have you. And this woman is getting more and more offended as the minutes pass by and they're having this conversation. So what she does, instead of walking away from this conversation or even turning around and saying, can you stop, she starts tweeting, right, the exact transcript of the conversation these guys are having, and then to top it off, she takes a picture of each of the guys and she posts it on her Twitter feed, right? So this goes viral, right? This goes viral. The guys, they work for one company. One of the guys gets fired because his boss says it's completely inappropriate for you to do this, whatever, he gets fired. And in a twist, she actually gets fired, because now her boss is looking at her like, why are you, invading these guys' privacy, basically? You're posting their pictures. We cannot have you do that, and we cannot have it related to our company. So, hence the question, are we becoming a nation of overly sensitive, politically correct whiners?
Yes. I mean, there were just way too many sensitivities. I think that if I took offense to everything I hear all the time, I'd go berserk just complaining about one thing or the other. Obviously, I'm Hispanic. I don't look Hispanic. A lot of people confuse me to be other things, but I've even heard other Hispanics will stand around me in front of me, speak in Spanish about me, okay, and say things that they don't think that I understand, but I understand perfectly clear. I could take the opportunity to say, hola, hello, that's me. I'm here and I speak Spanish and I understand you, guys, anytime you get a group of guys together, go to a ball game, go anywhere. You're going to hear a lot of stuff that could be offensive, but in general, I let all of that go. I really don't take offense to so much. I have a really thick skin when it comes to these things. The only time that I think it really bothers me if I hear something that's really inappropriate is if I'm with my children. If I'm with my children and somebody's cursing or carrying on in a way, I might say, hey, do you mind, my children are here. Something like that. Or just walk away. Just walk away.
Is that being politically correct?
Yeah, and you're using them as an example. You can always use them as an example of what not to behave like, and when you have that conversation with your children. But no, I think that, yes, in general, too many people have way too many sensitivities about too many things these days, and it's just insane. And when you use social media to spread it, it can backfire like it did with her.
Absolutely. Marco?
Well, I think this woman had no right to eavesdrop in the first place. I think the alternatives you mentioned were normal for normal people. There's something wrong with this woman. And to sit there and spread this text, I mean, she obviously had, in my opinion, a malicious intent to harm these men. And I don't know why. Maybe she knew them, maybe she didn't. And then to take their pictures and circulate it, which of course gives rise to lawsuits, since the one guy did lose his job.
Sure.
I mean, if I'm saying something in private and you and I are both joking around, the fact that a third party listens when they're uninvited or weren't meant to hear is one issue, but to then publicize it throughout the world is, to me, ridiculous. Does it mean we're too sensitive to being politically incorrect? Well, the problem is that apparently it's considered important to be politically correct because two people lost their jobs from this.
Sure.
So we can't say, are we too thin-skinned, because the results in this case were catastrophic. And people should stay off their social media buttons. I mean, there's too much of that.
I think we should distinguish, though, I mean, between the difference between going to a ball game, for example, and have a couple guys sitting behind you and chatting away this way, versus a convention where these people were all sent by their employers. I think that when you're attending functions like this, and I've attended many, you definitely have a responsibility to hold yourself to a higher standard, and certainly that type of language would be highly inappropriate in that setting.
Well, I think in this particular case, though, in their defense, they were actually speaking in tech terms. She took offense at the terms they were using, you know, like they were.
She got the message.
Yeah, they were talking about a dongle, which is a tech term, and she misinterpreted it or took it a certain way. Maybe they were using it as a double entendre. They obviously were kind of joking around with each other, but they weren't being offensive. So that, you know, it's not like, you know, they were making an outright penis joke, which is apparently what she took it to be. And this woman just so happens to be an evangelical too. So
I'm filing my complaint. You said penis on there. You know, what's wrong with you?
But for me, I think, especially if you are in a field that's dominated by men, and for men too, who may be in a field that are dominated by women, women have inappropriate conversations as well.
Sure.
And sometimes you have to kind of swallow your pride or whatever it is, if you are in a field that's, you know, and just go with the flow. I mean, I know when I first moved to New York City after law school and started working, I was the only woman in a firm with 5 guys. And we'd go out to eat somewhere after work, and they'd be talking about, oh, look at the rack on that one. You know, can I get offended, file a complaint with HR? Yeah, you know, sometimes it was just easy to be like, oh, yeah, she really does have a nice rack.
Thank you.
and keep going, because, you know, and I think that was the issue with this woman. Are we becoming a nation of overly sensitive people? Yeah, I think so. Definitely, political correctness is getting the best of us. But that does it for our show for today. So thank you all for watching, and please keep sending us your comments, because after all, the opinion is about you, and it is where your opinions matter. So thank you.